what lies ahead for the future of STEM. I'm Annie Gibbins. Women's Biz Leaders starts now. Women's Biz Leaders, presented by Women's Biz Global, where each episode we dive into the journeys and successes of remarkable women in business. In this episode, we sit down with a trailblazing mentor leading the charge to empower the next generation of women in STEM. Joining me now is Dr. Morley Muse. Welcome to the program, Dr. Muse.
Thank you very much for having me, Annie.
It is a delight to have you on the program. We'll be talking all things STEM because it's a discussion that we need to have because I know it's an area that is just very, very low in female participation. So I'm looking forward to hearing from your expertise. You are an expert in all areas across academia, industry, government, in the area of engineering, yes, right? Particularly renewable energies that we're going to be talking about today. What have been your biggest challenges in this area?
I guess in terms of challenges, I don't see myself as just Morley. I see myself as a community. So what are the challenges that women generally face? I'll give you two examples of from my personal story. So I started my PhD 3 weeks after having my first son. Now, there was nothing wrong with, doing that and raising a family, but the system, it wasn't just designed to, I guess, favor women. At the time, I didn't have like a scholarship to say I could fall back on to enable me complete the PhD while raising a child. And eventually, I had to go into entrepreneurship on top of my PhD. So these are some of the, I guess, access barriers that women face in STEM. In Australia, we have a situation where women make up 36% of university STEM enrollments, but only 15% of STEM qualified occupations. So it's not just getting through. Previously, we've thought that girls are just not interested in science, technology, engineering, or maths, but that's not what the numbers are saying. They are certainly interested. 36%, it's not a lot, but it's significant. But looking at those numbers and seeing that just 15% of STEM qualified occupations are occupied by women, we need to do more. And why is this important? The STEM sector is very critical for job creation and innovation. By next year, 90% of the jobs in Australia would need STEM skills.
Wow.
Yes.
90%.
I mean, if you're already using computer or you're engaged with technology in some way, you're already engaged in STEM, right? So without technology, I don't know where we would have all been. So STEM is really critical, and we need all hands on deck. Interestingly, in Australia, we've had the lowest birth rates in the last 23 years. We've had the lowest birth rate last year.
Right.
So women do not want to have children, and it's not a surprise. It's because they are not being supported. You know, when you talk about challenges, there is gender bias. Then there is the motherhood penalty, where a lot of the women get to that stage where you have to have a child, and then going back to work is a nightmare. Last week, I was speaking to a lady that she's doing her postdoc, and she's had a baby and just really finding it very hard to get back into academia. Now, we have a situation in Australia where most of the funding in academia is usually like contract, 1 year, 2 years. So if you take time off to have a baby and then you're coming back to work, it is a nightmare, and it doesn't have to be like that. I worked in construction. At the time when I did work in construction, this is not something I'm proud to say, but it's something that happened to me. There were no breastfeeding rooms on site. So it's essentially saying we want women, but we don't want women with milk in their breast. Yes. You know, so when you have situations where the system doesn't support women, it's not, how do I say this? it shouldn't be women to fix this problem alone, right? We have to see it as a societal problem. Last year, the federal government set up a task force, a gender equality task force, and we saw some very alarming statistics that the cost of gender inequality to the Australian economy is $128 billion annually. Wow. So that's a lot of money for us to be losing as an economy. Can we then put that money to support more women? And then what's going to be the effect of that? What kind of change would we see as a result of that? That's a question that I'll throw out there for everyone to ponder on.
Exactly. It's a collective effort that we need to get government investing into the infrastructure that supports these professions.
Exactly.
The fact that 90% of roles are going to require STEM, I mean, we're going to have a massive skills deficit when we're looking at the percentages of actually starting and then finishing if it's only 15%. For those viewers who are watching you speak now, and you know you've gone all the way to PhD in engineering, you're a powerhouse in renewable energy discussions and so forth, sitting on STEM boards and so forth. What was your career journey? How did you actually, start? What was the journey like for those young women watching and wanting to be inspired by that? I know it's been challenging, and I'm happy for you to share that it has been challenging, to the point that you started at, where you actually are at the peak of your game, doing a PhD, wanting to do a PhD, and then you're getting those gender barriers.
I think it all starts with curiosity. And so that's why we should embrace curiosity of children. And I think the other thing is, personally, I've seen, like in Australia, we start too late to engage young minds into STEM. We should be starting as early as 5-year-olds, like 3-year-olds even. Interestingly, I think 2 years ago during National Science Week, my son's kindergarten found out I'm a scientist, and they said, oh, what can you do for the kids? And I thought, what could I do for 3-year-olds? But it turned out I could do something. And I did 2 science experiments. I did one on turning primary colors to secondary colors. And you could see how curious and how engaged they were. They are interested. And I think it starts from there. So for me, I grew up as a very curious kid. I used to ask like tons of questions. In fact, my mom hated me for that. But my dad, was an engineer, may so rest in peace. And he encouraged that curiosity. My mom did too, but my dad was an engineer, and I loved watching him come home in his workbook. So there is a saying that you can't be what you can't see. It is certainly true in the world of STEM, and that's why it's very important that while we encourage young girls to study STEM, it is equally important for them to see their role models, their moms, their aunts, not just the ones who have actually studied STEM, to actually work with it. So I think where it all starts is curiosity. Curiosity, don't stop asking those questions, and role modeling.
I love that because I've got 2 little granddaughters, and I'm noticing that, they're only 2 and 6, and I tell you what, all children are curious. These curious minds that we don't want to be stifling them. We want to be encouraging them, and definitely the area that you are now into, which is mentoring through Women in STEM programs, to actually mentor them. That's right, you have to see it to believe it. So while you may not have seen that many women before you, we now have women, not enough women, but we still have women mentoring those women. So for those women watching the show today, and they're thinking, you know what, I've been that person. I do have a curious mind. I've always been asking a million questions. I'm excited about technology and the environment, sustainable energy, forces, things of that nature. I want to know, do you encourage them? We want to encourage them, but realistically, why do we need to encourage them, and what will be their challenges, and how do you support them in pushing through those challenges to be able to shift the dial in this area?
The company that I run, iSTEM, we engage in research, consulting, and recruitment of women, from early career professionals up to senior level women in STEM. So we work with companies to get them through. Now, there are 5 key areas that I think we must focus on as an economy, as a nation, to get more women into STEM, but not just getting them, to keep them in STEM, which is I guess the most important, attrition is a big issue.
Absolutely. It's retention. It's not just acquisition. When we're seeing the dropout rates that we've already established, it's keeping them 10 years, 20 years to become experts in the field.
You're right. So at iSTEM, we do a lot of work around education. We call it our 5 pillars: education, employment, retention, leadership, and entrepreneurship. All of these areas are very important to, get more women into STEM. Like you're right, you said retention. Some of the companies, there are companies that we've worked with that have retention rates of over 50%. Like attrition rates of over 50%. So it's not just getting women through the door, it's keeping them. So how we tend to solve that problem is we do have a program we call mentoring retention program.
Right.
Yeah. Now with the mentoring retention program, we don't just look to fix women, because women are not the issue here. They don't need to be fixed, but the system. So how we do that is we work with the women, we provide one-on-one support, we provide workshops all year round, we work with the women within an organization, but with their direct line supervisors as well. Because it is important that for us to get all hands on deck, the men also need to be involved in this conversation.
Absolutely.
I was saying to someone that I don't have a girl, I've got 3 boys. So ideally I shouldn't be bothered, about gender equity. But everyone should, because at the end of the day, it's not just, we shouldn't solve a problem just because we think it doesn't directly affect us. If something is wrong with your neighbor and you don't try to solve it, eventually it's going to spill over to you. So it's a problem that we have to see as a collective. So we have to create collective solution as
I totally agree. And all the conversations we have definitely on this show, it's about all of us being aware of the key issues and then being able to be really open with not just academia and reporting the statistics, but actually going to government, going with big corporates to find solutions, such as breastfeeding rooms, such as,
little
changes that are not massive, but they'll make a massive difference. If you're losing a lot of people, a high percentage of your profession because of these barriers, which are not huge barriers, then once you've had 2 or 3 children or whatever your life brings to you, then you then go on in that career, and that's what we're wanting. We're wanting more and more people like you, Dr. Muse, who are out there saying, I'm wanting to be a force and involved in renewable energies, hydrogen discussions, being able to be a point at the table for these big discussions with industry. I thank you for being on the show today.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
I thank you for joining our show today. Let's go for those big, bold targets. Collectively, we can. We need to be having more and more of these conversations. I thank Dr. Muse for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
You're watching Ticker. We'll have more in just a few minutes.